What's up, guys? I want to start off by thanking y'all so much for 1,000 subscribers. It's been my goal to reach that for such a long time, and I'm just so thankful. And to celebrate reaching 1K subs, I wanted to do an Iceberg video on Alabama football. But first, let's announce the winner of my giveaway. It is Adams Talk Sports. Congrats. Email me at landonalmighty@gmail.com and we can hash the details out. If you're not familiar with what an Iceberg video is, an Iceberg video is a format of video that gives information on a topic, starting with the top, which are well-known topics, and progressing to the bottom where there are lesser-known topics. Depending on how well this video does, I might do an iceberg on college football in general. Now, before getting into the iceberg, I want to say that I made this iceberg all by myself. So if there are any additions or problems you have with the iceberg, I'm sorry, I'm not perfect. The iceberg in its entirety will be posted on my community tab. Okay, now let's get into it. This is the first layer. The first layer is going to be stuff even non-college football fans know of. 2nd and 26. So yeah, everybody and their mama is going to be aware of these Tier 1 entries. 2nd and 26 is obviously the game-winning play for Alabama during the 2017-18 National Championship game. Alabama trailed Georgia 13-0 going into half. Nick Saban made the decision to bench starting quarterback Jalen Hurts, who was 25-2, in favor of true freshman Tua Tagovailoa, and the rest is history. Tua would create a spark in the team and had the team tied 20-20 at the end of regulation. After UGA kicked a field goal, Bama needed a field goal to tie or a touchdown to win. On the first play of the possession, Tua took a huge sack, resulting in a 2nd and 26, which was made even worse due to the fact that Bama's kicker was having a terrible game. What happened next cemented Tua and Devontae Smith in Alabama lore forever.
Tagovailoa trying to make up for it. Fires to the end zone. Touchdown! Alabama wins!
The Rocky Block. We have another game-winning play with this entry. We all know about Alabama versus Tennessee, one of the most heated rivalries in college football, and the Rocky Block is one of the most iconic moments in the rivalry. It happened on the third Saturday in October in 2009. Alabama led the Vols by 2, but Tennessee was in field goal range for the last play of the game. Then Tennessee head coach Lane Kiffin was looking for a huge victory, but Terrence Cody had other plans.
Lincoln for the lead. Blocked again! Cody again! Oh my! Alabama wins!
Gravedigger. A very recent entry to this list is the game-winning play from the 2023 Iron Bowl. Alabama was down 4 to Auburn and facing a dire situation as it was 4th and goal from the 31-yard line. Auburn made a fatal mistake, though, by not rushing Jalen Milroe at all as he launched it to Isaiah Bond for a touchdown to win the game. The iconic play that Bond called Gravedigger is cemented in Alabama lore forever.
That's all it is. But there's a lot of airspace to cover for Milroe. Still looking. Firing. Near corner. It's caught! Touchdown, Alabama! Isaiah Bond!
Lank. Lank is a term that was created as a motto of sorts by the 2023 Alabama football team. It was created in the offseason and gained even more prominence as Alabama gained more naysayers after the loss to Texas. Players like Terrion Arnold and Jalen Milroe promoted the term and even sold merch with the term on it. The official meaning of the term is "let all naysayers know," but the real meaning has been called into question. The disaster in the pasture. This entry doesn't refer to a specific play per se, but really the entire ending of the 2021 Iron Bowl. Alabama was down 10-3 to Auburn. The offense had been struggling all game long and had given up a whopping 7 sacks. With around 92 seconds left, Alabama took over from their own 3-yard line with no timeouts left. Bryce Young would go on to lead an incredible drive that was topped off with a touchdown to Ja'Cory Brooks to tie the game. The game would then enter overtime for the first time in Iron Bowl history. And not just overtime, 4 overtimes. After Kool-Aid McKinstry broke up an Auburn pass, Alabama would get the ball back, where Bryce Young threw the game-winning pass to John Mechie to beat Auburn 24-22. This would help the Tide win the SEC championship a week later, and then help Bryce Young win the Heisman Trophy a week after that. The name of the entry refers to Auburn Stadium being referred to as the Plains and the university's overall connection to agriculture. The Crimson Crane was a celebration that started being used by Alabama Athletics in 2021. It is the iconic crane kick pose from the Karate Kid. It was started by wide receivers Jamison Williams and John Mechie. The most iconic use of the celebration was on the just previously mentioned game-winning play against Auburn in the 2021 Iron Bowl. While not used quite as frequently anymore, the Crimson Crane has been used past 2021 as the Alabama and Auburn's men's basketball teams have used the pose to troll each other. The Crimson Crane was also frequently used alongside the martial arts emoji, which was constantly used by Alabama fans in 2021. Forrest Gump. Everyone knows the iconic 1994 film Forrest Gump. One of the most famous scenes from the movie shows Forrest joining the Alabama football team. He is placed at kick returner, and despite his lack of knowledge for the game, he uses his blazing speed to return a kick all the way back. Paul Bear Bryant is even in the movie, portrayed by Sonny Schroyer. The Jalen Hurts story. The Jalen Hurts story is one that is inspiring and should be told to every young athlete in America. I gave a little bit earlier, but I'll recap. Jalen Hurts came to Alabama in 2016 and, due to an injury to Blake Barnett, became the starter right away. He's the only true freshman to start at quarterback for Nick Saban. He had a great 2016 season, winning the SEC Offensive Player of the Year award and came just short of winning a national title. He had another great year in 2017, getting Alabama to the national championship game again. He struggled that game, though, and down 13-0 at half, Jalen was pulled for Tua, and you know the rest. Instead of immediately transferring, Jalen stuck around at Alabama and continued to develop in 2018. During the 2018 SEC Championship, Tua Tagovailoa sprained his ankle, and the Tide were down 28-21. Jalen was put into the game, and history repeated itself. Jalen would rally Alabama back to win the SEC Championship game at 35-28 over Georgia. In 2019, Jalen would transfer to Oklahoma and have an amazing year, finishing as the Heisman Trophy runner-up. He would be drafted in the second round by the Philadelphia Eagles and is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL currently. Eli Gold. Eli Gold was the official voice of Alabama football for over 35 years. He's behind some of the most iconic calls in Alabama history, and he was Alabama football to those who experience games exclusively by radio. Due to his recent health issues battling cancer, Gold was let go by the University of Alabama in February of 2024. Julio Jones. Everyone is aware of who Julio Jones is. He's one of the greatest wide receivers in NFL history. Before the NFL, though, he attended the University of Alabama. Julio Jones isn't on this list solely for his play, though. He was a huge 5-star recruit coming out of high school, and when he picked Alabama, it was a warning sign to college football that Alabama was back. Julio Jones would go on to win the 2008 SEC Freshman of the Year award and be part of the 2009 National Championship team. The Rammer Jammer Cheer. The Rammer Jammer Cheer is an Alabama tradition after every football game. It goes... Hey, This is a fairly recent tradition as it was just started in the early 2000s. While the cheer is usually just played twice, exceptions are sometimes made, like when Alabama beat Auburn in 2008. The $1 Million Band played it 6 times to mark the ending of Auburn's 6-game winning streak over Alabama. The Walk of Champions. The Walk of Champions is an Alabama tradition where the coaches and players of Alabama football walk the same path to the locker room surrounded by fans and students. The Walk of Champions is located near Alabama's 5 statues for each head coach to win a national title at Alabama: Wallace Wade, Frank Thomas, Paul Bear Bryant, Gene Stallings, and Nick Saban. This is the start of the second layer. This is stuff casual fans of the game of football would know. Rat poison. Rat poison was a term constantly used by Nick Saban to describe the media. It was used to describe both positive and negative media attention. The first usage of the term by Nick Saban was on October 7th, 2017, when he said, "The stuff that players hear on ESPN, it's like poison, like rat poison."
No, I'm trying to get our players to listen to me instead of listening to you guys. You know, all that stuff you write about how good we are and all that stuff they hear on ESPN, it's like poison. You know what I mean? It's like taking poison, like rat poison. All right, so I'm asking them, are you going to listen to me or are you going to listen to these guys about how good you are?
The kick. The kick was the game-winning play from the 1985 Iron Bowl. It was the 50th Iron Bowl, and heading into the final drive, Alabama was down 23-22. A string of plays got Alabama to the 35-yard line to set up a long field goal attempt. Van Tiffin knocked down a 52-yarder to give Alabama the victory.
He missed a 52-yarder earlier, wide left with the win. This is 52 yards into the breeze. Not strong, but there's some. The kick is up. Long enough. It's long enough, and it's good! He made it!
The run in the mud. Here we have yet another iconic Iron Bowl moment. It was the 1967 edition of the game, and Alabama was down 3-0 to start the fourth quarter. It was the first Iron Bowl played at night, and it was extremely rainy that day. Early in the fourth quarter, though, quarterback Kenny the Snake Stabler ran the ball 53 yards for the go-ahead touchdown. Alabama would win the game 7-3.
Towards the end, here's the block by Holman. There was a block by Mike Hall back there, too. Chatwood's block, and Stabler turned it on. I could watch that all night.
Kenny Stabler's famous run in the mud covered 53 yards.
The sack. The sack was a play from a game featuring Alabama versus Notre Dame in 1986. At the time, Alabama had never beaten Notre Dame before, but things changed on that day in 1986 as early in the game, Notre Dame's quarterback ran a play action, and as he turned around, he met Alabama All-American linebacker Cornelius Bennett for a huge hit. The play was a warning sign of Alabama's dominance in the game as Alabama won 28-10.
5,000 yards in his 4-year career at Notre Dame. Play action and boom, down he goes. Cornelius Bennett. Loose ball, no, the trip calls the fumble. Oh my goodness, did Cornelius Bennett bury him at the 25-yard line.
Number 315. 315 is in reference to Paul Bear Bryant winning the 1981 Iron Bowl. It was his 315th career win, the most of any college football coach at the time. The Iron Bowl win was also the 9th straight win over Auburn, an Iron Bowl record that still stands today. The goal line stand. The goal line stand is one of the greatest plays in Alabama history, only being matched by the likes of 2nd and 26. It happened at the end of the 1979 Sugar Bowl against Penn State. It was 3rd and goal from the 1-yard line, and Penn State QB Chuck Fusina jokingly asked Alabama defensive lineman Marty Lyons, "What do you think we should do?" Lyons responded, "You'd better pass." Penn State ignored this advice as they ran on 3rd down and then ran on 4th down, where Alabama linebacker Barry Krause met the running back in the backfield to stop Penn State and help Alabama win the game. This would be the icing on top of the 1979 season, as after the game, Alabama was named national champions by the AP poll.
Penn State, 19-game win streak, only undefeated team in the country, ranked number 1 in the nation. Alabama ranked number 2. Everything could be hanging on 4th and goal with a half a yard. Gooman, he didn't make it.
Tebow cried. Tim Tebow might be the best player in college football history, but he was no match for Alabama in the 2009 SEC Championship. It was Tebow's final collegiate season, and he was hoping to win another national championship, but those plans were foiled when Alabama beat Florida 32-13. As the final seconds were winding down, the camera started panning to the team's benches. Alabama was celebrating and mocking the Gators, but on the Florida bench was the now iconic shot of Tim Tebow tearing up as the Tide won. This moment has been memed and joked about for years. Alabama doesn't really have 18 titles. This is a claim constantly made by non-Alabama fans as to the true number of championships that Alabama has. Now, going into every championship is a tedious task, but if so, you'll find that every Alabama championship claim is pretty solid, aside from 1941. Even as a Bama fan, I doubt the 1941 claim's legitimacy. But 1966 should absolutely be claimed, which I'll talk about later on the Iceberg. The bottom line is, whether it's 14, 16, or 18, Alabama still has more national titles than your favorite team. I promise you that. Roll Tide. The Terrible Mikes. This entry discusses a string of bad Alabama coaches in the early 2000s, all sharing the name Mike. First, there was Mike Dubose from 1997 to 2000, who, despite winning an SEC title, was still underwhelming and had a near 500 record at Alabama. Then there was Mike Price, who didn't even get to coach a game. I'll touch on that later. And lastly, there was Mike Shula, arguably the worst coach in Alabama history. Shula finished with a 300 record and had 3 straight losses to Auburn. These Mikes represent the dark times of Alabama football. Henry Ruggs. The story of Henry Ruggs is a tragic one. He was a star wide receiver and a national champion at Alabama. Due to his blazing speed, he was drafted in the first round of the 2020 NFL Draft to the Las Vegas Raiders. He had a really promising rookie campaign, but it would all be cut short in his second season when on November 2nd, 2021, he killed Tina Tintor and her dog while driving under the influence at 156 miles per hour. In 2023, he pled guilty and was sentenced to 10 years in Nevada State Prison. It is very sadly ironic, as Ruggs would sometimes do a celebration that honored his friend who was killed by a drunk driver. Through a tin horn. This is a viral quote straight from the mouth of Nick Saban expressing frustration about the media, assuming Alabama would have an easy game. To do it justice, I'll play the clip in its entirety.
And a lot of people take a lot of things for granted, and I get asked questions like, well, how important is it for the young guys to get to play this week? Well, how in the hell you know they're going to get to play? I mean, what makes you think that you can just assume that they're going to get to play? Because you're assuming that the other team is not very good. They do have a Division I quarterback. He plays like a Division I quarterback, and they're very, very productive on offense, and they do a great job of executing what they do. And if we don't play good against them, you all don't remember the Georgia Southern game, do you? I don't think we had a guy on that field that didn't play in the NFL, and about 4 or 5 of them were first-round draft picks. And I think that team won a national championship, but I'm not sure. And they run through our like through a tin horn, man, and we could not stop them. Could not stop them. Could not stop them.
The third layer. This is stuff the casuals wouldn't know, but every fan of college football should know. Get your popcorn ready. This was a quote from former Alabama offensive coordinator and Ole Miss head coach Lane Kiffin when Alabama played Ole Miss in 2021. He said it in the pregame interview and proceeded to toss his headset. Alabama would dominate that game, winning 42-21. Big Al even made fun of the comment by wearing a popcorn bag costume.
Tell you about today.
Well, let's hope we didn't run out of pages. So here we go. Get your popcorn ready.
Well, what's the big thing?
Whoa. I guess he's
LSU can't get past the 50. This references the 2011-12 BCS national title game where Alabama beat LSU 21-0. LSU had beaten Alabama previously that year, so this win was sweet revenge. Alabama's defense was so stifling, in fact, that not only did LSU not score, but they didn't get past the 50-yard line until late in the fourth quarter. And once they did cross the 50, they were immediately sacked back behind it by the Crimson Tide defense. Alabama has a Nick Saban problem. This is a direct quote from sports analyst Joel Klatt. Klatt would be proved hilariously wrong, as after the statement, Saban would win 113 more games and 3 more national championships. In fact, in the same segment, Colin Cowherd would claim how much better Michigan State was than Bama. The Tide would beat Michigan State 38-0 later that year.
Fault. So I say that and saying it's not Lane Kiffin's fault. It's not the quarterback's fault. They have a Nick Saban problem in Alabama. They pay Kirby Smart and Nick Saban north of $8 million. $8 million.
Sam Cunningham. Sam Cunningham was an All-American running back for USC in the early 70s. He was part of an all-black backfield for the Trojans, which was groundbreaking. Alabama's football team was all white at the time, and when USC played the Tide in 1970, Sam Cunningham had a monster game as USC blew out Bama 42-21. This performance helped convince the university to let Bear Bryant recruit black players, something he'd been trying to do for years but had been not allowed to. A former assistant to Bear, Jerry Claiborne, said, Sam Cunningham did more to integrate Alabama in 60 minutes than Martin Luther King did in 20 years. The following year, John Mitchell would become the first African-American player to play varsity football for the Crimson Tide. Mama called. This iconic phrase was uttered when the legendary Paul Bear Bryant was asked why he left Texas A&M to coach at Alabama. He responded, Mama called, and when Mama calls, you just have to come running. Bryant was an Alabama alumnus who played for the Crimson Tide from 1933 to 1935. This would later go on to be the title of a documentary about the Bear. Although not directly related, I also wanted to include another bit of information under this entry. Bryant filmed a Mother's Day advertisement in the 70s, and legend has it he improvised the last line. Take a listen.
One of the first things we tell our players is to keep in touch with their families. And when our freshmen first arrived, we asked them to write a postcard home right then. You know, we keep them pretty busy, but they always have time to pick up the phone and call. It's real important to keep in touch. Have you called your mama today? I sure wish I could call mine.
Reach out and touch someone.
The Strip never happened. Every true college football fan knows about the Strip. It happened in the first national championship game between the Crimson Tide of Alabama and the Hurricanes of Miami. In the late 80s and early 90s, Miami was known for their wild antics and their bold behavior. Before the game, Lamar Thomas, who was thought to be the fastest player in college football, talked trash about the Alabama defensive backs. Thomas called them slow and challenged them to be real men. Alabama cornerback George Teague took this personally, and when Alabama was leading in the third quarter, Teague made a play that would go down in history. From deep in their own territory, Miami's Heisman quarterback Gino Torretta threw a long pass downfield to Lamar Thomas, who had nothing but green grass in front of him. But George Teague tracked him down from behind and straight up took the ball out of his hands. This play killed any momentum Miami was trying to gain, and Alabama beat the heavily favored Canes 34-13. What some might not remember is the play didn't even count. An offsides by Alabama negated the turnover, but stopping the touchdown and the rundown itself took the life out of Miami.
Passes away, penalty flag down. Lamar Thomas has got it. Lamar Thomas is on his way down the sideline. George Teague is after him and runs him down. Takes the ball away from him. Teague's got the ball. And they tackle Teague back up to 12.
Mike Price. I told you we'd get to Mike Price. The former Washington State head coach was hired to replace Dennis Franchione as the next Alabama head coach. He was the coach of the Crimson Tide for about 5 months before he was fired in May of 2003. The reason for was Price, a married man, was spotted at a strip club in Pensacola, Florida. It was also discovered that there was a $1,000 charge to his room by a woman that he allegedly slept with. This was on top of earlier reports of him being a heavy drinker and hanging around bars in Tuscaloosa until sunrise. This behavior did not fly in the Bible Belt, and Mike Price was fired before he even coached a game. Catherine Webb McCarron. Catherine Webb McCarron is a model and the wife of former Alabama quarterback A.J. McCarron. This is ironic in itself since Catherine is an Auburn grad marrying a star Alabama player. She was Miss Alabama in 2012. She exploded in popularity after the 2012-13 BCS title game. Commentator Brent Musburger made some comments that are seen as creepy by some. He ranted about how QBs get all the women and how all young boys in Alabama are going to pick up a football if they get women like that. The clip went viral, and while Miss McCarron herself wasn't bothered, many claim Musburger went over the line.
Now, when you're a quarterback at Alabama, you see that lovely lady there. She does go to Auburn, I want to admit that. But she also, Miss Alabama, and that's A.J. McCarron's girlfriend, okay? And right there on the right is Dee Dee Bonner. That's A.J.'s mom. Wow, I'm telling you, quarterbacks, you get all the good-looking women. What a beautiful woman.
Wow, A.J.'s doing some things right down in
So if you're a youngster in Alabama, start getting the football out and throw it around the backyard with Pops.
The ULM loss. One of the most embarrassing losses in Crimson Tide history happened in Nick Saban's first year, 2007. Alabama wasn't doing well that season, but was still favored by 25 versus the Louisiana Monroe Warhawks. ULM stunned the college football world when they beat Alabama 21-14 in Bryant-Denny Stadium. Alabama played in the Independence Bowl that year, and ULM fans trolled them by putting up a billboard on I-20 that had the score of the game and the words "Tide Rolled." Nick Saban would share a story years later that after the game he encountered a fan that didn't recognize him, and he said, "We'll never win a national championship with that Nick Saban as the coach." The Wishbone. The Wishbone was an offensive system used by Bear Bryant in the 70s. Although the Wishbone was created by Darrell Royal and Emory Bellard, Bryant not only adopted it, but expanded and innovated the Wishbone. Bryant kept it a total secret that they were switching from the I formation to the Wishbone. At the time, people were starting to wonder if Bryant was washed up, but through the Wishbone and the recruitment of black players, the Bear would go on to win 8 more SEC titles and 3 more national titles. Alabama killed the BCS. It is widely believed the switch from the BCS to the playoff system happened in part due to the 2011-12 BCS title game, which I mentioned earlier. Alabama being in the game instead of Oklahoma State was controversial in the first place, and the fact that the championship featured 2 teams from the same conference added fuel to the fire. This is ironic since the playoff has been expanded to 4 teams. 2 championship games with 2 SEC teams have happened already. While Alabama didn't kill the BCS alone, they sure put the nail in the coffin. Cal College. This is a nickname for Auburn given by Paul Bear Bryant. Why the exact quote and origins are debated, the most commonly accepted quote is, "Sure, I'd like to beat Notre Dame, but nothing matters more than beating that cow college on the other side of the state." The nickname is still used to tease Auburn fans to this day. Kayvon Thibodeau, Alabama Education's Stigmatism. This entry refers to former Oregon edge rusher and top 5 draft pick Kayvon Thibodeau when he was asked about why he went to Oregon and not schools like Alabama. Kayvon said, "The stigmatism of Alabama education. This is ironic for several reasons. While Alabama is nowhere close to being the Harvard or the South or anything, the university boasts one of the top law schools in the country and a really good nursing program. Secondly, while bashing Alabama education, Kayvon misused the word stigmatism. A stigmatism is an eye condition, something I have actually. Kayvon probably meant to use the word stigma, which means a mark of shame." The fourth layer. This is starting to get to topics really only Alabama fans would know, and not every broad college football fan would know. The textbook scandal. Get ready to hear about a lot of scandals, as I put most of them in this layer of the iceberg. Alabama's textbook scandal happened under Mike Shula, but it wasn't ruled on until the 2009 season. It involved football players and other athletes using their scholarships to get a total of $40,000 worth of textbooks for other students. In response, the NCAA made the university pay around $45,000, and they vacated 21 football wins. Most of the 2005 and 2006 seasons and the first 5 games of the 2007 season were vacated. Players known to be involved and suspended because of the scandal were Antoine Caldwell, Marlon Davis, Glenn Coffey, Marquise Johnson, and Chris Rogers. The Fail Room. The Fail Room is a room at Alabama named after James M. Fail, a program booster who gave a generous gift to the university that was upwards of $1 million. This isn't any regular campus office, however. Alabama put this opportunity to good use. The Fail Room is the official name of the locker room for the visiting football teams in Bryant-Denny Stadium. James Fail always wanted something named after him, but due to his unique last name, he had problems coming up with what to put his name on. This was until he attended a game and had the idea, and he made a special request to former athletic director Mal Moore to have the locker room named after him. Although Mr. Fail died 14 years ago, there has been recent pressure on the university to change the name due to alleged insurance fraud that Fail committed. Alabama almost hired Bobby Bowden. Yes, you heard that right. The Crimson Tide almost hired the 2-time national champion with 377 wins. I mean, Bowden was born in Alabama and grew up a fan of the Crimson Tide. In 1986, Alabama passed on Bobby Bowden to hire Bill Curry, which was not a great decision. Bowden was shocked he wasn't offered the job and in all likelihood would have taken the job if offered. Bowden reportedly wasn't offered the job due to doubts about his ability to coach black players, despite the fact that he coached black players at West Virginia and Florida State. And not only did Bowden almost become the Alabama coach, he almost did it twice. After Bill Curry resigned in 1990, Alabama rushed to offer Bowden the job. Bowden thought it over and declined it though. He claimed that Florida State was his school and Alabama would always be Coach Bryant's school. While on the topic of Bobby Bowden, while researching this entry, I learned that Auburn considered hiring him in 1980, but Bowden declined and recommended Pat Dye instead, who would go on to be one of the best Auburn coaches ever. The Langham Scandal. Antonio Langham is one of the best players to ever don crimson, and I would go as far to say that he might be the best defensive back in Alabama history. He made some poor decisions, though, which led to problems for Bama in the late 90s. Langham signed with an NFL agent while still in college. The NCAA was unnecessarily harsh and brought the hammer down on Alabama. They vacated 8 wins from 1993, along with probation, a 1995 postseason ban, and major scholarship reductions. It's rumored that Gene Stallings retired earlier in 1996 due to frustrations with these punishments. The scandal set Alabama back years, and the Tide never truly recovered until Saban came along. The Albert Means Scandal. The Means scandal might be the most serious scandal Alabama football has ever faced. Albert Means was a super talented D lineman coming out of high school in 2000. He was such a sought-after player, in fact, that after an FBI investigation, it was found that Alabama booster Logan Young paid $150,000 for Means to play football at Alabama. Alabama was given a 2-year bowl ban and 5 years probation as a consequence. Kentucky was also given a 1-year bowl ban for trying to pay for Means, and despite evidence of inappropriate behavior, Arkansas, Georgia, Memphis, Ole Miss, Tennessee, and Michigan State got off scot-free. Most of these recruiting violations were not done directly through Means, but by his greedy high school head coach, Lynn Lang. Means never played much for the Tide and spent his college career at Memphis. He was a decent player there, but encountered problems such as academic ineligibility, weight gain, and injuries. Means never made an NFL roster. Ethelred Ep Sykes. Although hard to find information on him, Ep Sykes was the composer of Alabama's fight song, Yeah, Alabama. He composed it in 1926 after Alabama won their first national title by beating Washington in the Rose Bowl in the 1925 season. Alabama almost hired Rich Rodriguez. One of the most interesting and consequential decisions in college football history was Rich Rod turning down the Alabama job. Bama had just fired Mike Shula in 2006 and was looking for a replacement. They originally wanted Miami Dolphins head coach Nick Saban, but he repeatedly and publicly claimed he wouldn't take the Alabama job. In early December, Alabama offered the position to West Virginia coach Rich Rodriguez, which he declined. Like mentioned before, Alabama had a string of recent scandals and several losing seasons, while Rich Rod was building a consistent 10-win program at West Virginia. Alabama Athletic Director Mal Moore decided to go after his dream candidate Saban one more time, and on January 3, 2007, Saban accepted the job. Saban had grown frustrated with the pro game. He didn't have nearly as much control, and team doctors not clearing Drew Brees really angered Saban. Rich Rod would go on to be Michigan's coach a year later, but didn't last long. Rodriguez was an utter failure and set Michigan back years. To say Alabama dodged a bullet is an understatement. 1962 Alabama versus Georgia was fixed. This was a claim made by the Saturday Evening Post in 1963. They alleged that Georgia Athletic Director Wally Butts and Paul Bear Bryant conspired to fix the 1962 game between them in favor of Alabama. The only evidence of this was an insurance salesman who claimed to be patched into a call between Bryant and Butts where the fix was discussed. Further investigations seriously doubted the claim. Bryant and Butts were very angry with the allegations. The scandal led Butts to having to resign. Butts sued for libel and won what would be the equivalent of $30 million in today's money, although he didn't see every dime of that. Bear Bryant settled out of court in 1964 and was awarded the modern-day equivalent of $3 million. Mike Dubose slept with Deborah Gibson. Yikes, another one of these scandals. In 1999, a rumor leaked that the Alabama head coach was having an affair with his secretary. Dubose denied these claims for 3 months, but finally admitted the rumor was true. He had to pay what would now be $500,000 out of his own pocket in an out-of-court settlement. Mike Dubose would be fired in 2000. While part of this was definitely due to his underwhelming 2000 season, the scandal certainly didn't help. Cecil Hurt. Cecil Hurt was a Tuscaloosa sports writer for almost 40 years. He wasn't just a sports writer, though. He was the columnist for Alabama Athletics. He He was part of a team of reporters who won the 2012 Pulitzer Prize in breaking news reporting for their coverage of the 2011 Tuscaloosa tornado. Cecil Hurt sadly passed away in 2021 at the age of 62 due to complications from pneumonia. After his death, prominent figures like Paul Feinbaum, Reese Davis, Greg Byrne, Greg Sankey, and former Alabama athletes gave their condolences. Nick Saban even sung his praises, saying he was a good friend and one of the best sports writers he's ever had the privilege of working with. Mr. Hurt is a huge inspiration to me as I want to be a journalist one day. Rest in peace. The brick through Curry's window. We've talked about Bill Curry a little bit already, as he really wasn't a great coach and only coached Alabama for 3 years before leaving for Kentucky. Alabama fans were used to the winning of the Bryant days, and the fact Bama passed on Bowden for him and the fact Curry went 0-3 versus Auburn did not make him a popular coach. He was also a Georgia Tech alumni, which doesn't seem like a big thing nowadays, but the Alabama and Georgia Tech rivalry used to be a pretty fierce one, and longtime Bama fans still held grudges against the Yellow Jackets. This disdain for Curry was made even worse when Bama was upset by Ole Miss in 1988. The Rebels scored 2 touchdowns in the last 46 seconds to upset the Tide. Alabama didn't complete a pass all game, and it was the first time Ole Miss had ever beaten Bama in Tuscaloosa. Alabama fans were so upset that one unknown fan tossed a brick through Bill Curry's office in Tuscaloosa. While some Tide fans doubt the story's legitimacy, Curry and staff members insist the story is true to this day. Here is Layer 5, the start of the descent into the iceberg. Crazy Tony Brown, Renfro lied. Tony Brown was a former 5-star cornerback who played for Alabama from 2014 to 2017. He's a 2-time national champion and is currently on the Cleveland Browns roster. His teammates and later on fans know him as Crazy Tony. He got this nickname for his non-stop trash talk and wild pregame antics. The name really sticks, though, because of one interview after the 2018 Sugar Bowl. To give some context, Alabama had played Clemson in the national title game the year before. It was a back-and-forth game that Clemson eventually won on the second-to-last play. On that play, Deshaun Watson found Hunter Renfro for a now iconic moment in college football history. Renfro was assigned to Tony Brown on the play, and it said Brown took the loss harder than anyone. Brown and the Crimson Tide would get their revenge when they beat Clemson 24-6 in the college football playoff. Crazy Tony's post-game interview with Simone Eli would go viral after. Here it is.
What are your feelings right now?
I feel great right now. We came here to dominate, that's what we did.
Talk about this domination, defensively, offensively. I mean, this was Alabama's game the entire way.
We laid out a plan, the coach laid out a plan for us, and we did the plan. So that's what happened. We played tougher, and we dominated for longer than they did. That's what we did.
You started this season in Atlanta, now you're going to end it in Atlanta. How excited are you to go be playing Georgia, an SEC matchup in the national championship game?
I'm just excited as I was for this game. When we get prepared, that's the same. You know, last year after the national championship game, the players, Hunter Renfro, he lied about it, something about keeping me up. That was a lie. But I thank him, and I thank Dabo Swinney for all the ammunition they gave his team to come get right in this game, in this playoff. I thank them for the ammunition they gave us. I thank you. I appreciate you. I appreciate that. We need all the ammunition.
Thank you, Tony.
Bama Fever, Tiger Pride. Bama Fever Tiger Pride is one of the most popular fan shops for Alabama and Auburn and has been in business since 1983. There are 10 locations from Mobile to Birmingham. It has anything you can ever think of wrapped in either crimson or navy blue. It's a tradition among some Alabama fans, or at least myself, that after every big game, like an Iron Bowl, an SEC championship, a national championship, to run down to Bama Fever the Sunday after to pick up a graphic tee with the score of the game on the shirt. I've spent far too much money at Bama Fever over the years to even think about. Nick Saban hates Brock Purdy. This belief comes from an alleged conversation between the two that Purdy's high school coach said they had. Coach Preston Jones said that Brock told him that Saban told Brock, "You're below average in height, your arm strength is whatever, your accuracy is average." Now, whether Saban actually said this is not known, but if he did, Purdy proved him wrong. Brock Purdy is the starting quarterback for the 49ers, played in the most recent Super Bowl, and led the NFL in passer rating last year. The assessment that Saban hates Purdy wouldn't be fair, though. I mean, Saban offered him a scholarship, even though Purdy only had a handful of small FBS offers at the time. Overall, I doubt Saban loses sleep over it. During the time Purdy was in college, Nick had Tua Tagovailoa, Mac Jones, and Bryce Young, all of which were Heisman finalists in college and all of which started games in the NFL last season. Daniel Moore. Daniel Moore is an artist that depicts iconic moments across several sports and colleges, but he is by far most well known for his paintings of iconic Alabama football moments. He started in 1979 with artwork of the Goal Line Stand. Since then, he has created dozens of paintings of the most iconic people and moments in Alabama history. While at first he was supported by the University of Alabama and they gave him sideline access to every game, that changed in 2005. In 2005, they went to court over Moore's art, where they eventually ruled that Moore's artwork was defended by the First Amendment. He designed a stamp of Paul Bear Bryant for the USPS in 1997. Moore still makes art to this day, and he just came out with his most recent work, Gravedigger. Dixieland Delight was banned. Dixieland Delight playing at Alabama football games has been a tradition ever since the song came out in 1983. There's been a raging debate through the years on whether the song should be used by Alabama or Tennessee, but that's an entirely different subject, and that's not what the entry is about. The tradition of playing the song became controversial because part of the tradition is to add certain lyrics during breaks in the song. These lyrics are Auburn, LSU, and Tennessee too. So after 2014, the song was no longer played at Alabama football games. That was until October 13th of 2018 when the song was finally played again as Alabama beat Missouri 39-10. University officials urged fans to say beat Auburn, LSU, and Tennessee too, rather than the alternative, but no one really listened to that. Nick Saban versus Urban Meyer. This refers to a rivalry between two of the greatest coaches of all time. They are officially 2-2 against each other. Meyer won the first matchup in the 2008 SEC Championship, but Saban got revenge in the 2009 SEC Championship. Saban would beat Meyer again in the only regular season meeting between the two. Meyer would then even it back up when his Buckeyes beat Alabama in the 2015 Sugar Bowl. There used to be debates in the late 2000s and early 2010s about what coach was better, but those debates have since been answered. There are rumors that the emergence of Nick Saban in the SEC caused Urban Meyer to leave Florida, but those haven't been proven. Connections between Alabama and the Miami Dolphins. This entry is just about a series of recurring connections between Alabama football and the Dolphins. I'm a fan of both, so roll Tide and fins up. Firstly, there has been a great number of former Tide players that have had great careers with Miami. For example, Dwight Stevenson, Bob Baumauer, Tony Nathan, Tua Tagovailoa, Jalen Waddle, etc. Then there are the coaches with ties to Miami. In 1970, Bear Bryant agreed to become head coach of the Dolphins but got cold feet at the last minute. The Dolphins would go on to hire Don Shula, arguably the greatest coach in NFL history. Don Shula's son, Mike Shula, would go on to play quarterback for Alabama. Mike Shula got into coaching and was a QB coach for the Miami Dolphins when Alabama made him the next head coach. When Shula didn't work out, the Tide hired Nick Saban, the head coach of the Dolphins at the time. It's just so funny to see how there are so many ties between my favorite two football teams. They low down, they dirty. This is a quote from an iconic video of then Alabama student Irvin Carney expressing why and how he hates Tennessee. It is shared every year when Alabama and Tennessee play, and I love it. Here it is.
All right, man. Just say what you've been saying, man. Why do you hate Tennessee?
Man, I hate Tennessee because, first of all, it's Tennessee. And I just hate them because they low down, they dirty, they some snitches. And I hate Philip Fulmer. I hate their colors. I'm not a dog person. I just hate Tennessee, man. Like, and I hate Neyland Stadium. It looks like a garbage truck worker convention. And I hate all their quarterbacks. I hate Tennessee, man.
Describe what you feel about their colors, too. I thought that was interesting.
It reminds me, and it's not that orange that you can stand. See, I hate Tennessee more than I hate Auburn. I just dislike Auburn. I hate Tennessee. See, Tennessee's colors is that throw-up orange. It's not that orange that you can sit with. It's that puke inside of a pumpkin orange. And I don't like pumpkins. So I really don't like Tennessee, man. I can't stress that enough, man. And they losers. They sore losers because they're not Alabama, and I hate Tennessee, man.
That was beautiful, man. Probably the best interview I've done all year. Thank you, man.
Dude, man, I can't stress that enough. I hate them.
Coach shows. It's been a tradition at Alabama to have coaches recap the game in a small segment named after the coach. From what I can tell, this started with Bear Bryant and The Bear Bryant Show. The show was famously sponsored by Golden Flakes potato chips and Coca-Cola, a great pair with the bear. There were 250 episodes of the show, but only 77 are available on tape today. The rest are considered lost media. I could find footage for every Alabama coach since having a show except for Dennis Franchione and Mike Shula, and I doubt Crimson Tide fans wanted a show recapping games during that time. Bama invented the medical tent and the turnover chain. Alabama athletics is one of the most innovative and well-respected programs in the country. Before around 2015, injured players would be in pain for all the crowd and cameras to see. That was until Jeff Allen invented the sideline medical tent to give the players privacy and to limit distractions. Alabama got a patent for it, and the NFL started utilizing them in 2017. Then there's the turnover chain, which, to be perfectly honest, Alabama didn't invent. It's next to impossible to really say who started a reward for a turnover, probably a high school team. Alabama was the first big-time college football team to start using it when they debuted the ball-out belt in 2015, given to a player that forced a turnover. Tim Tebow almost went to Alabama. Tim Tebow grew up a Gators fan, but he really liked Mike Shula and almost accepted the scholarship to play for Alabama. He was extremely close to picking Alabama, but decided to go with Florida at the last minute on signing day. In reality, this is a blessing in disguise. If Alabama gets Tebow, the 2006 season doesn't go as bad, and that means Shula doesn't get fired that year, which means Alabama never hires Nick Saban. It was best for both Tebow and Alabama that things went how they did. The Blackout Game. The Blackout Game was one of the first big wins under Nick Saban. It was against Georgia in 2008. Both Georgia and Alabama were top 10, and the Bulldogs decided to rock an all-black uniform they rarely wore. They ended up wearing black to their own funeral as Alabama was up by 31 at halftime and ended up winning 41-30. This caused Georgia to abandon the black jerseys for another 8 years. Too much Bama in me. In the 1954 Cotton Bowl, Rice was running all over Alabama, especially Rice running back Dickie Mogul. Mogul broke away from the defense for a sure touchdown when Alabama fullback Tommy Lewis got up from the sidelines to tackle him. The ref ruled it as an unfair act and awarded Mogul the 95-yard touchdown anyway, as Rice beat Alabama 28-6. When asked about it after the game, Lewis said he had too much Bama in him. Here is a clip of the play.
As Mogul broke down the field for another long run, Lewis suddenly jumped up from the Bama bench and made a picture-perfect tackle. Then he retreated back to the bench and became the first player in the history of the Cotton Bowl to try to hide during a game.
The phrase was also later used by Harvey Updike who we'll get to later, to explain and justify his actions. The sixth layer. This is only stuff true Alabama fans will know, people that's been around with the program for a while. Chris Davis stepped out. We all know what the kick six was. Sorry I even have to bring it up. There's some upset Alabama fans to this day that suggest Chris Davis stepped out of bounds on the play and it should have been called back. I hate the kick six too, but Chris Davis did not step out and there is no evidence that shows he did. This is something that only old Facebook boomers think, sadly. Gotta stop that inside trap. This is a direct quote from Joe Kynes. Kynes was Alabama's interim head coach for the 2006 Independence Bowl versus Oklahoma State, which Alabama ended up losing 34-31. His halftime interview went semi-viral for his gravelly voice and attitude. It still cracks me up. Here it is.
It's been a while since you were the head coach. What do you tell your team at half?
We just got to stop that little inside trap. You know, the option didn't hurt us much. We played pretty hard. We just got to stop that inside thing. Offensively, we kind of sputtered around, got the ball in the end zone. You know, defensively, we got to get out off the field on that 2-minute drive.
With key injuries to your offensive line, what do you do in the second half?
Oh, we're just going to play. We just got to keep playing.
Thank you, Coach.
He has a magnificent personality, I'll tell you that. All right.
Greg McElroy is annoying. This is just an overall sentiment among Alabama fans. Although we appreciate what he did at quarterback, many Tide fans just cannot stand his career as a sports personality. To some, he appears to try and be unbiased, which is good, but he overcorrects himself and talks bad about Alabama to not seem biased towards them. In my opinion, I don't hate Greg McElroy, but he does say some arrogant stuff from time to time, though. The program almost received the death penalty. It seems crazy to even say nowadays, but this was once close to happening. You remember when I mentioned all of those scandals a few years ago? Yeah, well, they almost caught up to the Tide. After the Albert Means scandal, Alabama was labeled a repeat offender and considered a candidate for the death penalty. If you don't know what the death penalty is, it is a punishment from the NCAA that bans a team from playing for at least a year, often more. SMU got the death penalty in 1987, and it affected them for over 20 years. If Alabama did get the death penalty, it would have had one of the biggest snowball effects college football could ever imagine. The university would still probably be dealing with the effects to this day, and definitely would not have seen this recent success it has had. Nick Saban leaving for Texas. In 2013, there were big rumors that Texas was trying to get Nick Saban in Austin. Now, to those rumors, Texas absolutely did pursue Saban and wanted him. While Alabama is a very rich program, Texas is as rich as they come. There are reports that Saban considered it briefly, but decided against it. A lot of it was probably to boost Saban's contract at Alabama. Saban's agent, an agent for almost every big coach in college sports, is Jimmy Sexton, and Sexton pulls stunts to get his clients raises like this all the time. I seriously doubt that Saban got really close to going to Texas. Tua almost transferred. I've already told the story of Tua Tagovailoa, so I don't want to retread over too much ground, but before the national championship game, Tua had grown frustrated with his lack of playing time. Jalen was playing good but not spectacular, and Tua was balling out in practice every day. If Tua did enter the transfer portal, which he would have sought his dad's permission to do, he likely would have gone to USC, who had offered him in high school. How different the programs of Alabama and USC would be today if that happened. Live mascot. Yes, Alabama used to have a live elephant mascot. The elephant was stored on campus in the 40s and was named Alamite. Yes, that is where Big Al's name comes from. In the 50s, a carnival would lend an elephant for the homecoming queen to ride on. While Alabama opted for the costume Big Al and the idea of the live elephant died out, there was a live elephant as recent as 1991 versus Tulane. Also, while discussing the elephant mascot, here's a fun fact. Bear Bryant did not like the idea of an elephant mascot as he thought they were slow and unintimidating. Big Al wouldn't be named as the official Alabama mascot until 1979, one of Bear's last years. White helmets. Alabama football is known for their iconic uniform look. Crimson or white jerseys with white pants and crimson helmets. It is looked down upon to even suggest Alabama wear an alternate uniform. But on a few occasions, Alabama has worn white helmets. Alabama has worn them in the 50s and a few times during the 1983 and 1984 seasons. The last instance I can find of Alabama wearing the white helmets was in 1984 against Cincinnati. Nick Saban was asked about the possibility of wearing white helmets in 2022, and he shot the idea down. Harvey Updike. Harvey Updike is one of the most notorious single college football fans ever. Updike was a lifelong Alabama fan who absolutely hated Auburn. Despite no proof of this, he claimed that Auburn students celebrated the death of Bear Bryant. He also said that Auburn students had put a Cam Newton jersey on Bryant's statue that really set him over the edge. So, he decided to poison Auburn's famous trees at Toomer's Corner. It's an Auburn tradition to roll the trees with toilet paper after big wins, and they mean a lot to Auburn folk as they were over 80 years old. 2 weeks later, he would confess to his act on the Paul Feinbaum show while pretending to be Al from Dadeville. The call was eventually traced back to Updike, and he would plead guilty to a felony. He spent over 2 months in jail and was ordered to pay $800,000 restitution. The University of Alabama condemned his actions, but despite making apologies, Updike would defend his actions in one way or another up until his death in July 2020.
Okay, well, let me tell you what I did. The weekend after the Iron Bowl, I went to Auburn, Alabama, because I live 30 miles away, and I poisoned the 2 Toomer's trees.
Okay, well, that's fair.
I put Spike 80 DF in them.
Did they die?
Do what?
Did they die?
They're not dead yet, but they definitely will die.
Is that against the law to poison a tree?
Well, do you think I care?
No.
Okay, I really don't.
Okay.
Roll down Tide.
Bama in Jerusalem. Alabama is one of the most recognizable brands in college football. So recognizable that there's an Alabama fan shop in Palestine. Hani Imam opened the store in 2000 after he noticed that Alabama-themed items that sold at his dad's store were a hit with tourists. This just shows Alabama's brand and its reach. This is the start of the 7th layer. This is stuff that really only die-hard fans know. The Machine. This is more to do with the University of Alabama overall, but The Machine is a secret society consisting of members of Alabama fraternities. They have been around since the early 1900s and influence the votes for student elections. Their power reaches far past that, though, as many former members of the Machine go on to become Alabama state politicians, and the Machine has been accused of voter fraud in actual real elections. The Machine has been accused of racism, bigotry, harassment, burglary, wiretapping, arson, and assault. They have been called the most powerful frat in America. Nick Saban almost retired in 2013. A 2022 report alleged that Nick Saban considered retiring all the way back in 2013 after the Kick 6. He's apparently ready to hang it up and become a sports personality. Saban changed his mind about taking a job at ESPN and decided to coach Alabama, and Tide fans are glad he chose to. Saban would go on to win 7 more SEC titles and 3 more national titles in his 10 seasons afterwards. Bear Bryant predicted his own death. Bear Bryant coached his last game in the Liberty Bowl versus Illinois in 1982. After the game, reporters asked him how would he spend his time now that he had so much of it. Bear jokingly responded, probably croak in a week. He wasn't that off, as 4 weeks later, Bryant suffered a massive heart attack and passed away at the age of 69. Doctors were surprised he was able to coach at all his final years due to the condition of his heart. After his death, he was given a huge funeral procession through Tuscaloosa that thousands attended. A month later, Ronald Reagan posthumously gave Bear the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and there was a moment of silence before Super Bowl 17 to honor his legacy. George Wallace ruined the three-peat. Alabama was national champions in 1964 and 1965 and went undefeated in 1966. The Tide were not claimed as champions, though, as none of the polls selected them. Why not, you ask? A lot of people theorize that poll voters refused to show support to Bama because they refused to integrate the team. Bear Bryant wanted to at the time, but George Wallace was strictly against it. Not voting Alabama as champions was seen as a protest against Governor Wallace's racist policies. In an alternate universe where George Wallace isn't a garbage human being, Alabama completed an unprecedented three-peat, and Bear Bryant is a 7-time national champion. Allegedly, Jay Barker tried to kill Sarah Evans. Jay Barker was the starting quarterback for the 1992 national championship team. In 2008, he married country singer Sarah Evans. In 2022, there was an alleged altercation in which Barker tried to hit Evans with his car. Now, whether his intent was to kill is not known, but running someone over with a car can definitely be fatal. He avoided jail time and the couple separated and were in the process of filing for a divorce. Miraculously, however, recent news has come out saying that Barker and Evans have reunited their marriage. Pat Dye was an Alabama man first. I brought up Pat Dye earlier in the video. He is one of the most successful coaches in Auburn history. But did you know he coached at Alabama before Auburn? Dye was a defensive assistant under Bear Bryant from 1965 to 1973. At Auburn, Dye would go on to win 4 SEC championships and 3 SEC Coach of the Year awards. Alabama does. This is a quote from Alabama defensive end Jonathan Allen. After the 2015 Cotton Bowl, in which Alabama beat Michigan State 38-0, a reporter told Allen that 38-0, teams don't do that in the college football semifinals. Allen cut him off right there and responded, Alabama does. Alabama went on to win the national championship a little over a week later.
38-0. I mean, teams don't do that in the semifinals of the college football playoff.
Alabama does.
Derrick Henry at linebacker. This statement seems weird now, but there are rumors that because of Derrick Henry's size, that he would end up playing linebacker in college. Recruitment services and sports publications theorize as to whether Derrick Henry would be an offensive or defensive player. There is even a popular rumor that he was recruited to the University of Florida as a linebacker, and that's why he turned them down. Henry would go on to prove that he could play running back very well, and he won a Heisman Trophy and a national championship for the Crimson Tide. King Henry is one of the best running backs in the NFL today and recently signed with the Ravens. Bear Bryant broken leg game. Bear Bryant was tough, no doubt about that, but many just don't know how tough. In 1935, during the entirety of the Alabama vs. Tennessee game, Bryant played the entire game with a broken fibula. Not only did he just play, he caught several key passes as well. Alabama won the game 25-0 and solidified the toughness of Paul Bear Bryant. Joe Namath's suspension. The idea of suspending your star quarterback for some harmless fun seems outlandish nowadays, but it wasn't to the Bear. For the last 2 games of the 1963 season, Bear Bryant suspended starting quarterback Joe Namath. Bryant was already pissed due to a loss to Auburn, and when he heard Namath violated team rules by getting drunk and making a fool of himself late at night in Tuscaloosa, Bryant lost it. He suspended Namath and told Steve Sloan he would start for the last 2 games against Miami and then Ole Miss in the Sugar Bowl. Alabama ended up narrowly winning both games. Namath came back next year and won the 1964 national championship. Steve Sloan would help win the 1965 national championship. I'd also like to mention I'm recording this bit a day after Steve Sloan himself passed away. Rest in peace, Steve Sloan. Braves stole the A. Two of the most popular teams in the South are the Alabama Crimson Tide and the Atlanta Braves. They also share extremely similar logos. But which came first? According to my research, it's Alabama. The first association between the iconic Script A and Alabama that I could find is this photo of Coach Bryant in 1958. The first time I could find a Script A being associated with the Braves were 1966. I even went before 1966 when the Braves were in Milwaukee to try and find evidence, but I came up empty. So, my research concludes that Alabama was associated with the Script A first. For all you sports historians watching, please feel free to fact check me. This is the last layer of the iceberg. This is stuff only some true fanatics are aware of. Tua's language barrier. This refers to a now infamous post on a Bama online message board by Shuttertown Tide. Here is the post in its entirety. I haven't heard it mentioned, so I thought I would address the elephant in the room. He seems like a smart kid, so I'm wondering how his transition to the States has been as far as communication goes. Are we doing anything different, like special playbooks or relying on signals more when he's in the game? I thought I saw him point to receivers a couple of times, and defenses might catch on if he's pointing to who he's going to throw the ball to. The only time I've been out of the country is when I was shipped to Nam, and I was as confused as a Yankee learning to square dance. To the surprise of many, this is a real post, and as much as the guy is made fun of, and he should to an extent, you gotta feel bad for him. He is a lifelong Alabama fan who got a scholarship from Bear Bryant but decided to fight in Vietnam instead. Tua himself reacted to the post from a now deleted tweet with a simple laughing emoji. Allegedly, Lane Kiffin slept with Kristen Saban. Now, I want to say, I am not claiming this to be fact. This is mere rumor and speculation. The rumor started in 2015, shortly after Alabama lost to Ole Miss. It alleged that Kiffin had an affair with Saban's daughter and an Alabama booster. There's not any grounding to this story, to be honest, but it spread like wildfire, with Colin Cowherd and Clay Travis posting about it. Cecil Hurt dismissed the story with a simple tweet. No. Mekhi Brown. There were so many great linebackers to play for Nick Saban at Alabama, but Mekhi Brown is not considered one of them. In fact, what he is best known for is very negative. In the 2017-18 National Championship game, Brown had a physical altercation with a Georgia player that resulted in a penalty and him getting sent to the sideline. Not long after getting chewed out by Nick Saban, Brown attempted to punch assistant coach Kerry Stevenson. Alabama would, of course, go on to win that game in dramatic fashion. After the season, Mekhi Brown transferred to Tennessee State, an FCS school. He would be a really solid linebacker there, but his time was cut short by an injury. After college, Brown joined the Birmingham Stallions of the then USFL. He didn't stick around long, though, and has since retired from the sport of football. Coach said. Coach Cedric Burns is the athletic relations coordinator for Alabama football. Coach said is considered to be Nick Saban's right-hand man, and you can spot him beside Nick on Saturdays if you pay attention. Burns has been with Alabama for over 40 years. He started as an assistant for Bear Bryant in 1982 and has seen all the successes and failures of the Tide since then. If you're wondering, no. Coach said is not retiring and does not plan to soon. He is currently on Kalen DeBoer's staff. Brandon Chicken. Tim Williams was a pass-rushing linebacker for Alabama from 2013 to 2016. He's a national champion and was named second-team All-SEC one year. Williams got into a bit of trouble at the start of the 2016 season, though. He was stopped by the cops, and Williams and his friend had marijuana in their possession. Williams and his friend claimed they were holding it for a man named Brandon Chicken. The internet ate this story up, and Williams got off with no charges. Bear Bryant's lighter. Everyone knows of Paul Bear Bryant's time at Alabama, and some know of his time at Texas A&M, but fewer know of his time at Kentucky. He even won Kentucky's only outright SEC championship in 1950, and got them closest they've ever been to a national championship. Kentucky basketball also won an SEC championship that year under legendary basketball coach Adolph Rupp. How was each man rewarded for their accomplishments? Rupp got a brand new Cadillac and Bryant a cigarette lighter. This showed Bear that no matter how good he did for Wildcat football, basketball would reign supreme. This influenced Bear's move to Texas A&M and then eventually Alabama. Now, there are serious doubts to this story, but Bryant reiterated it in his autobiography. Critics say the story was merely a joke. Either way, the sentiment is true. Kentucky basketball has gone on to win a ton of more championships, while Kentucky football has never had a season as good as the 1950 season since. Captain Kidd's Cleaners. Every Alabama fan knows Paul Bryant and Don Hutson, two of the biggest legends in not only Alabama, but sports history. Bear Bryant and Hutson were such good friends that they opened up a dry cleaning business in Tuscaloosa in 1937. Ultimately, the venture failed and they both went on to focus on other things. For Bryant, being an assistant at Alabama, and for Hutson, being a wide receiver for the Packers. It's not anything major, but could you imagine wanting to get your clothes dry cleaned and then you're met by 6-time national champion Paul Bear Bryant and Hall of Fame Don the Alabama Antelope Hutson? Gay players on the 92 team. After Michael Sam came out, Clemson coach and former Alabama player Dabo Swinney claimed there were gay players on the 1992 Alabama team that won the national championship. Now, if I remember reading correctly, Gene Stallings denied this claim, but I cannot find a source for that now. This is obviously no big deal. It's a non-story, but it's just ironic. Alabama is one of the states least accepting of LGBT individuals, especially since that same year, 1992, Alabama passed a number of anti-LGBT bills. The Tua Dominoes Post. In 2019, Tua suffered a season-ending and almost career-ending injury versus Mississippi State. After the season was over, some wondered if Tua would return to college. Before the hip injury, he was considered the consensus number 1 overall pick. After several players announced they were coming back, the Alabama football official Twitter account posted a GIF of dominoes falling. The internet went crazy picking this apart. Fans pointed out how at the end of the GIF, a 1 changes to a 3, symbolizing 13 for Tua, which means Tua was coming back for his senior year. This madness would end about a week later when Tua announced he would forego his senior season and enter the NFL draft. That week in between, though, was one of the craziest times to be an Alabama fan on Twitter. The University of Alabama does not exist. This statement comes from a Reddit post that went viral. I'll read the whole thing to you. The title says it all. I don't think Alabama truly exists as a school. There are no classes. If you somehow break into one of the buildings on campus, you'll find dusty storage rooms with used jock straps and satanic altars to Bear Bryant's demon ghost. I've met so damn many Alabama fans. Roll Tide, they say. If you ask them what year they graduated, they will usually hit you with the, I ain't never been to college. Like that's the most ridiculous thing they've ever heard. I live and work in the South. I've interacted with fans of every SEC team, and most of them have actually attended the university they root for, and have never, not once, met an Alabama fan that went to Alabama. The school isn't real, and because of this ongoing farce, they should have all wins vacated for the last century, and a team of priests need to attempt an exorcism of Bear Bryant's demon ghost. Thank you for your time. Now, this is obviously a troll post, but even I find it funny. I bet everyone who has ever paid money to go to Alabama, though, thoroughly disagrees with this post. Steve Bartman's Butterfly Effect. This is our final entry, and it's a doozy. It originates from a Reddit post by Disraeli Ears. I don't know how many of you are familiar with a butterfly effect, but it posits that a small, tiny action like killing a butterfly can drastically alter the course of history forever. This is one of those moments. Most of what I'm going to read is word for word from a post by Red Star on TideFans.com. In Game 6 of the 2003 NL Championship game between the Cubs and Marlins, Steve Bartman interfered with a foul ball and made history. The Cubs went on to lose the game and eventually the NLCS, sending the Marlins to the World Series. In 2003, the Marlins and Dolphins shared the same stadium, and since the Marlins were in the World Series, the dirt on the pitcher's mound remained on the playing field for a couple extra weeks during the early weeks of the NFL season. One of those weeks, October 19th, 2003, the Dolphins played the Patriots. Olindo Mayer, one of the best kickers in the game, missed 2 field goals, both of which were kicked from the area used for the pitcher's mound. Both missed kicks were blamed on kicking off of the soft dirt instead of the usual grass. The game went to OT, where the Dolphins eventually lost. The Dolphins finished their season at 10-6, 1 game shy of the playoff. This was the second straight season the Dolphins had missed the playoffs, a first since 1996. The team was traded away and free agents were allowed to walk in order to rebuild the team. The next season, the Dolphins started 1-8. Their coach, Dave Wannstedt, left midway through the season and became the Pittsburgh Panthers head coach. Nick Saban left LSU for the Dolphins and Miles left Oklahoma State for LSU. In his third season at Pitt, Wannstedt led the Panthers to one of the biggest upsets of the decade. At 4-7 and a 28.5-point underdog, they took down the number 2 Mountaineers in Morgantown, a team that was poised to play in the 2007 national title game. The loss propelled a 2-loss LSU team back into the national title game, where they eventually won and helped continue the streak of current SEC BCS net championships. The loss is also what propelled Rich Rodriguez into the Michigan job. Had West Virginia won, Rodriguez would have stayed. What coach in their right mind leaves for another job when their current team is set to play in the national title game? If Rodriguez stays at West Virginia, the SEC and Alabama might look completely different. Miles would have left for Michigan, leaving the door open for Saban to return to LSU. Remember, this is all during the time Saban was on the verge of leaving the Dolphins. Given the prospects of returning to an already stacked LSU team that he had built, or trying to rebuild a struggling Alabama program, I believe he would have returned to LSU. Without Steve Bartman interfering with that one ball, Alabama doesn't get its dynasty, and the entirety of college football is totally different. Well, that's the entire video. This was a very long video, so thank you if you were still around to the end. This video took forever, so I would appreciate a subscription or at least a like. I just hope I taught you at least one new thing. And again, thank y'all so much for 1,000 subscribers. With that being said, peace out and roll, Tide, roll.